Hey everyone, it's spring and time to tackle some garden projects. This week I've been tackling a few things I've been putting off, as well as getting my hands dirty with planting some things. I also put together a really quick arbor and do a walkthrough to see how the permaculture beds are doing. I'm Willow Wakely at Two Toe Farm. Let's start this off with a little garden tour. These are some blueberry bushes in bloom. We have some blackberries that are about to flower. This garden is just about a year old and is really coming to life. You can see I used some hooks on my fence to keep these upright so that they don't re-root every time they touch the ground. This is a cherry tree, and you can see I pruned it with some wax on the top here last winter. Here's an apricot tree, and these are brand new. I planted 2 hascaps, or honeyberry plants, that I got at a local nursery. This is my columnar apple that is in bloom. Dalen has some Christmas lights on there. Here is a bunch of kale sprouts that I had a bunch of seeds, so I just threw down. I also have garlic, asparagus, and other perennial herbs in that bed. Here is a raised bed with potatoes that I planted this winter. I planted a small variety so I didn't have to cut them, and that improves the chance of them actually producing. There's some kale that came up again. I did an experimental potato bin here with some extra potatoes I had. These are my raspberries, which are doing so great. I have in there garlic and strawberries as well, and a little bit of asparagus mixed in. That log is actually inoculated with mushrooms, and they're just about to bloom. Here in a raised bed, I have some lettuce that actually overwintered. I planted this in, I think, January, and then some peas coming up. These are baby beets and spinach coming up. And here you can see my Frankenstein grafted apple tree. I actually have 4 varieties of apple and pear grafted. Not bad for my first attempt, and then strawberries underneath. Here, another spring job is giving my plants a little boost with some natural fertilizer. And now it's time to get digging. I am planting a lot of my brassicas, my kale and my cauliflower, broccoli, collards, and a few other things. Of course, I start every bed out with a little bit of duck fertilizer. They're going to go through and aerate the soil and poop a whole lot in this bed. So I've been layering lots of mulch and leaves and straw into all of my raised beds. So I'm actually not going to till it or anything. I'm just planting with a little extra raised bed soil, and I'm plugging them in with kohlrabi in between to kind of fill in the gaps while the other plants get bigger. Here I found some worms that I was giving to the ducks. So I kept these at about between 12 to 18 inches apart. And like I said, I planted some kohlrabi in between because those will get harvested long before these broccoli and kale get too big. Here's some onions and leeks. I'm actually doing these in a separate bed, and I put tight rows of different types of carrots and lettuce and beets. And then I also did a spiral planting of straw flower, and I put those along the edge. Pamelo's supervising my work right here. I did a post on Instagram on how to DIY a snail roll to save space. Okay, so in with the brassicas, I'm planting some dill, some cosmos, nasturtium seeds, and I'm just kind of tucking them in. Onto the third raised bed, I found some volunteer pea shoots, so I was digging those up, and Pamela wanted them, so he had a snack. Again, I had the ducks help me out with turning up some of the soil. In this bed, I'm going to do some beans and edamame as well as onions. I chose this bed for the beans because they add nitrogen to the soil. Again, I didn't really till this. I just added some soil where I was going to be planting my seeds. Here are the onions I started by seed many months ago. You can see that they pull apart pretty easily. I used a string and some sticks to keep my rows somewhat straight, although that's not usually very important to me. Next, I plugged in my beans and edamame. I tamped those down and then gave it a good watering. On to the next garden task is sorting through my plastic containers. You can see I'm thinking, how did I get to this mess? I was able to sort through and just save the containers that I really needed. Here, I'm actually scrubbing them out with some soapy water. This helps prevent any disease from spreading. This was a bonus. I finally have my wine caps coming up. I inoculated my wood chips with these last summer. I make sure to check every day for new ones. Alright, on to the project I've been putting off. I wanted an arbor and a trellis for my peas on the way to the duck run. I needed to make it tall enough so that Dalen could walk under it easily, and I realized that cattle panel is a great option, but if you don't have a truck, that's not the most feasible option. So my lovely husband actually came up with a new idea for me using these grates that are used for concrete and then some steel rods. I played around with this quite a bit to try to figure out the best way to make it work, and I ended up weaving the rod into the panels and using some wire to connect them at the top. The rods weren't quite long enough to reach all the way to the bed, so I did use some scrap pieces of 2x4s to give it a little bit more strength. This was not exactly what I had in mind, but it'll work for now. You can see my peas just poking up, and it was really time to get this done so that they had something to climb on. And my duck had been snacking on them in the last week, so I needed to protect them as well. I also plan to grow some asparagus beans on this as well. Those will come up and be ready as the peas are just winding down. Stay tuned to see how that works out. Okay, so I have a bunch of starts that I needed to actually get in the ground. Here I'm picking out some perennials and annuals to put in the front garden. I also had lots of containers with soil from plants that didn't survive a frost or that didn't germinate at all that I brought up with me as well. Since I have a heavy layer of mulch, I wanted to give a little extra soil where I was planting things. It's hard to believe that this was completely grass less than a year ago, and now things are just starting to pop up. I splurged on these pansies at a local nursery. They were just too beautiful to pass up. So a quick little tour around. You can see some stuff coming up from last year. So you can see my cherry tree doing great. I have some June berries here that flowered and are now fruiting already. Down here is prickly pear. This is an apple tree, a Wolf River. Down here some licorice mint protected from the rabbits. You can see some currants. These are black raspberries. These are my favorite from Michigan. I have them trellised up so that they also do not spread too much. Down here is strawberries and hazelnuts all the way down. And then here's a currant and a row of lavender. In a previous video, I did mention that I am taking out some of the currants because I have too many. This is a beautiful elderberry that I also transplanted from Michigan. The next day, I had to hurry up and protect these beds from the ducks because they were starting to figure out that there was stuff growing in there. So I don't usually love using this little plastic fencing, but it does last me a few years and it works pretty well. This is the struggle with having your gardens and your ducks in the same area. I did intentionally plant a few things like arugula and mustard greens along the edge so that they can nibble at it and it won't be a problem. Here I'm using a staple gun to just tap that down. Okay, last project is getting some of these things potted up. This is just one of those never-ending tasks that I actually really enjoy. And I'm going to wrap it up, but I really hope that you enjoyed seeing the garden progress and got inspired by some of the garden projects. Stay tuned for more permaculture projects and updates, and I will see you next time. Happy planting!